Imagine leaving everything behind. Just a 30-pound backpack, a pair of worn out shoes, and miles of open road ahead. No shortcuts, no guarantees, just one step at a time. What makes someone walk across the country? For James Thompson, it wasn't just about the miles, it was about a mission for peace. Through scorching heat, mountain lions, and unexpected encounters, James' journey became more than just a walk, it became a movement. In this episode, we dive into his incredible story, why he started it, what he discovered along the way, and how this journey changed his life forever. Ready to take a walk in his shoes? Let's go. This is Healing with Haley, episode 54, The Walk Across America, James' Journey for Peace. Welcome to Healing with Haley. I'm your coach, Haley Kirk. On this podcast, we dive into ways to heal, embrace, and truly love our lives. Here's my belief. So much of our suffering comes from what we believe. I'm here to help you understand your mind and question those thoughts to start your healing journey. Ready to get started? Let's go. Welcome, podcasters. I have my amazing BFFFF, brother from another mother, James Thompson. What is up?
What's good?
So we were just previously for an hour and just chatting away because we are best friends for how long now, James?
It's
Over
been
15 years?
14 years, I want to say. It's been
2011.
Yeah. We were
Yeah, 14
both
years.
freshmen at UVU.
Oh my God. It's been a wild ride. Yeah, we've been through so much together and I just love James. I think he's one of those like go-getter people that meets so many famous people and you're just such a go-getter. Like I love that about you.
I appreciate that.
So, I wanted to talk about something that James did with our mutual friend Paul, and they did a walk across America. And I saw the whole thing on social media, well, a majority of it. I've talked to them about it. They've told me like crazy stories about it, but I wanted you guys to hear this story about why they did the walk and what they experienced. So I brought my friend James on to tell you guys the story.
Yeah, I could never get tired about telling the story because it's so wild. Like you just can't make this up. Uh Such a
So
wild
start so start us on the origins. So
Sure.
why the walk? What sprung it about?
Yeah, so let me back up. So where I was in my life at the time for the last okay, so between about 2011 to about 2020 when we knew each other, I was jumping around to different jobs trying to find, what I really wanted to do. And I happened to discover content writing. And so I was a content writer for this marketing agency. I was writing for a lot of personal brands, speakers, coaches, entrepreneurs, and loved it. I loved telling people stories. So I was really just getting started in my profession and things were going really well. And then March 2020 happens and kind of shuts down everything. Everything is, well, as you know, like everyone was just full of fear, initially. And when everything was locked down and they were telling us not to travel, I just had this urge, I had this itch to just go out and travel. I've always kind of had that rebellious spirit.
I love that. I,
Like,
I feel like you and I are so similar in that way.
it's like I thought a lot of it was BS, to be honest. And now we found that a lot of it was, you know. And so not to say that people weren't getting sick, but anyway, so I just really had this desire to tell people stories. And uh, I got a job at a company that after I ended up leaving that marketing company because we lost pretty much most of our business because of COVID. And so I got another job. It was an office job, and I just hated my life. And all I could do was dreaming about traveling and talking to people, about their stories and starting a podcast or something or a YouTube channel. And so I created this vision board and I put this vision board in front of my desk. And a lot of times I found myself just kind of daydreaming and just thinking about traveling. And so this was this was about May 2020. And over the next few weeks, I started seeing things on that vision board come to life. Like I put a picture of this little Australian Shepherd dog. I got this dog. I was really excited about, even though things were still kind of weird with COVID, I was excited about traveling somewhere in the States. I didn't know what it was. And so it's a combination of that. And at the same time, I was kind of going through a spiritual awakening too, and maybe we'll get into later. But our friend Paul, kept on bugging me about watching this TV series about the life of Christ called The Chosen. And I watched The Chosen during Easter, and there was one part where Jesus is calling Peter to follow him, to leave everything behind and follow him and to preach the gospel. And I remember having this feeling when I watched this of wanting to do the same thing, just leave everything behind and go share some good news, not necessarily go on another, church mission like I did prior. I served a mission in DC, but, just try to lift people's spirits. So I had these desires, right? Wanting to travel, wanting to go spread some positivity. And then one day, so this was May of 2020, one day I get a call from my boss. No, I'm sorry, it was a text. I'd taken an extended lunch break. I think I took an hour lunch instead of a half an hour lunch. And he fired me. And I was so relieved. I'm like, that was an answer to my prayers. And so I was like, I'm free. I'll have to figure something else out. Maybe go back to doing freelance content writing. And that same day, our friend Paul calls me and says that he just went through a breakup and he was feeling really bummed about it. And he was living in Arizona at the time, so I decided to fly down to Arizona. And actually, right before this happened, I had this feeling to find a different home for my dog, Coda. And I'm like, something's about to change in my life. I need to just find him a different home. So that was really hard, but I knew something was really amazing on the other side. So that gave me some courage to do that, to find him a new home. So anyway, I fly down to Arizona. Paul and I road trip. We were going to actually just drive back to Utah because Paul was going to live with me here in Utah. We'd been roommates before, but we decided to drive to San Francisco, where he's from, and to visit his mom. So we decided to go to first Laguna Beach, where we visited one of my previous clients. And while we were in Southern California, this was on June 2nd, we noticed that, well, everything's locked down out there in California, but then there are all of these riots going on because of George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. So what happened was Paul was feeling really heartbroken about, this breakup, and he kept on saying, I just want to go on a long walk. And so we, walk alongside the beach and we were talking about maybe hiking, out in Montana or something, or hiking the Appalachian Trail. And I was just thinking like I want to just travel, right? I want to just do something freeing. And so anyway, we're driving up to San Francisco on June 2nd. So this is when George Floyd died. And I started noticing on social media, everyone's posting these black pictures in support of Black Lives Matter. And I'm seeing all of this division, this fighting back and forth between the lockdowns and Black Lives Matter. And I don't know, something was bothering me that day because I voiced this to Paul. I said, is there something that we can do more than just post a black picture? No matter what side you see about this issue, I kind of saw it as virtue signaling. Like, is this really going to make a difference 5 years down the road? Um, is this something that is going to bring the country together? And so I was venting this to Paul. I said, what can we do to make a difference to bring peace? And he turned to me and said, what if we did a coast to coast walk across America for peace, kindness, and acceptance? And I said, yes. So I grabbed him by the hand, shook his hand. I said, let's do it. And then I realized, like, what did I just commit myself to do? And so that's kind of a long story, but that's what led us to that point. And uh, we both felt it in our souls that this was something we were supposed to do, is use my talents, my gifts, and his as well to do this thing.
Wow, that's amazing. So, on your journey, your odyssey that you accepted, what were some of the hardest parts?
Yeah, that's a great question. So to continue with this, you know, I we when we decided to do the walk, we said, well, if we're going to do this, we have to do it soon, like in the next 2 weeks, because we're already into June, and this is going to take us at least 6 months, and we're going to be doing this in the winter time. So we went back to Utah. I sold everything, and we didn't even really plan everything out. It's not like we knew, okay, day 15, we're going to be here. We're going to have, there's just so many unknowns about this experience. And, we just kind of took a leap of faith, and we left on June 23rd. We started the walk on June 24th. We literally plugged it into Google Maps starting from San Francisco, and our destination was DC, but we wanted to finish in Virginia Beach because we wanted it to be coast to coast. So one of the things that, well, Paul actually jumped into the ocean. I just dipped my feet in because it was freezing. But to answer your question about the most difficult parts of the walk, I mean, physically, it was really hard. It was really hard on my body for the first 2 weeks. How do you really prepare to walk, 15 to 20 miles every single day in scorching heat, carrying a 30, 40 pound backpack? So many unknowns. We didn't know where we were going to sleep every night. We didn't know if we would be walking across the desert and have no access to food or water. I mean, there was a situation, I don't know if you know about this, Haley, but we got approached by a mountain lion in the middle of the desert, okay? Nowhere to run, nowhere to
Oh
hide,
my God, I think I remember
in
you
the
telling me
middle of
that
the
story.
desert, and the sun is going down, and this cat is hungry. And
Ah,
so, things like that,
sorry.
where I've never encountered a mountain lion before. I've never, you know, been in these situations where I was so vulnerable. Uh, and it was super lonely too. Even though I was with my best friend, a lot of times we fought. Like almost every day we were getting on each other's nerves. As you can imagine, like, because you're
Yeah,
making so many decisions together.
yeah. Wow.
Where, how many, what's the pace we're going? How do we spend the money that, we're receiving from people? Um, we just had different ways of wanting to do this. For me, it was more of I wanted to make external impact. For Paul, it was more internal. It was more about him finding peace. And so in the beginning, I wanted to socialize and talk with people along the way. And Paul was very much like, okay, every day we're walking 20 miles. He was a beast. He was really intense. And then it was like it almost flipped towards the end. It was almost like, I just wanted to finish this walk and be done with my life. And then for him, I think he kind of loosened up a little bit more. So it was almost like being in a marriage. I know that sounds really weird to say.
No, it makes sense.
No, we were both committed, and we had to learn to work through our differences. We had to learn to communicate. We have very different styles of communication. I tend to close up and not want to talk about things. And he was like, let's talk about it head on. And
Yeah.
that was
Wow.
scary for
That is so wild. I think when you, because you've told me this story before,
me.
but now hearing it again, what were some of the most unexpected, amazing parts of your walk?
Absolutely, the people that we met. Uh, we, wow, there were just times where I felt maybe the situation was so overwhelming, so scary, and God came through. people came through, and just really seeing the power of uh I know this is going to sound woo-woo, but manifestation. Let me just tell you this. So we walked for about 203 days, okay? Starting in the summer, continued through the winter time. So we had many opportunities to face pretty crazy weather, rainstorms, snowstorms, things like that. Guess how many times we actually had to walk through terrible weather? I'm not just talking about extreme heat. 5 times. I
None.
told Paul
Oh,
from
fine.
the very beginning of the walk that, we would have pretty good weather throughout the entire way. And we did. And there are other things that, we both manifested. Like, I'll tell you this story. Let's see. I'll tell you this story. This was December, and I'll back up for a second. So the previous year, in 2019, I went to a concert. At the end of the concert, I was ready to go back to my hotel, and this guy comes up to me and asks if I recorded any of the concert. I was gonna blow him off. I decided to share my contact information. We connected on Instagram, and then about 6 months later, when we posted about our walk, he shared that he actually lived pretty close to where we were gonna walk through in Bloomington, Illinois. Okay, turns out that this guy, he's from Kuwait, and he's also part of the Kuwaiti royal family. Okay. He became
Wow.
a sponsor for us on the walk. Okay. And then when we got to Illinois, get this, he hosted us for a few days. So this was around Thanksgiving. He he like had this bedroom made for us with like chocolates on the pillow and hygiene kits, and made us this amazing meal. And then for Thanksgiving, he took us up to Chicago, put us up in a hotel. He made like 50 sack lunches for the homeless, took us to this really nice restaurant right on the river. He bought me new shoes, but this is what's really amazing about this whole situation and this friendship that we have with him is, we were probably 3 weeks away from reaching DC, and we had just experienced, I think I had talked to you maybe around the same time. It was like mid-December, and there was snow on the ground. We were going through Cumberland, Maryland. And we made it a point to not really ask anyone for money. We always let people know, like, if they want to donate or whatever, they could do it, through Venmo or GoFundMe. But, there came to a point where we were pretty much out of funds and we were going to have to sleep in a tent. And I told Paul, I said, from Ohio until we finish, we're not going to have to sleep in a tent. That was probably the hardest thing for me, was always trying to find a place to set up the tent, a place that's safe, somewhere that we're not going to be kicked off the land, that had happened before. So I told Paul, I said, we are going to have a place to sleep tonight. I don't know how it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. And so I had done this pretty much throughout the entire walk, which was this walking gratitude meditation. Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about this, and where I would kind of
Love
get into
him.
this state. Oh, absolutely. We both got to hear him in
Yes, we did.
back in September. So I would spend a lot of time listening to maybe the same song over and over and over again. And it would put me in this really emotional state where I was really filled with gratitude because
What's the song?
just various songs like I listened to a lot of music from Andy Grammer, One Republic. One Republic, they have a lot of great music that is high vibration. And there's one song that's called Future Looks Good. And when you listen to it, it just makes you feel really optimistic about the future. And
Ooh.
it puts me in this really grateful state. So I would
Yeah.
listen to this song over and over again. And I remember thinking, I'm just going to express gratitude. I'm not going to ask for anything. And the first person that came to my mind was Jobber, this guy that we had stayed with in Illinois. And I kid you not, I can show you the text message. He texts me within an hour saying, "Hey, James, I had a feeling that you were calling my name. I got you guys a hotel in the next town. Merry Christmas." And that was so amazing because he didn't know, like nobody knew, that we were in need of a place. Like I didn't advertise that on social media. But we'd have experiences like that quite often where, I remember one time being in Nebraska, just walking along this really cold, lonely highway, and it was windy, and really depressing, and I had just like hit a wall. I think we were like pretty much halfway across the country, and just thinking, okay, I need to just start expressing gratitude because, when you're walking all day and maybe you don't have your phone, like my phone might have died or something, or it didn't have cell service, you're kind of just left with your thoughts. So your thoughts can go to a couple places. It can either go to, the past or the future, things that could go wrong, or you can discipline your mind to be in a place of gratitude. And so that's a lot of times that's what I would focus on is like, what can I be grateful for? So we had a lot of really amazing experiences throughout Nebraska. And I remember just this one day, it was really hard. And I was looking down and I was seeing like all these like needles and stuff on the side of the road and just kind of feeling like, okay, this is just another day of walking. We'll see what happens. This car, this like old beat up car. I actually have a picture of this couple. I wish I could show your audience, but
Hmm.
this couple pulls up and I believe that they were from, I want to say they're from Cuba, but they didn't really speak any English. They pulled up
Hmm.
in this really old beat up car and they were on their way to the hospital because the wife was in immense pain in her leg. They came out, we used Google to translate our conversation. I told them I was walking across the country and they told me that they were on their way to the hospital, but they pulled over just to check on me to see if I was doing okay.
Wow.
Came out, they come over, they put their arms around me and they start praying with me. And um, it was just so amazing. And then they handed me 20 bucks, which I knew they didn't have 20 bucks to give me, you know? Um, I'm gonna actually I have to show you this picture so you can see, Haley, uh,
Yes.
how amazing this was. Um, but that
Like
experience,
on their way to the hospital, they're like, "Oh, we
this
have
is,
time."
yeah, this is the couple right here.
Wow.
And it was such a blessing. It may seem kind of insignificant, but when you're doing something like what I did, where all day I'm walking and any kind of contact from a human was just so appreciated.
Yeah.
Um,
I bet.
yeah, I could just go on about different experiences that we had. I would say that that was by far, it wasn't so much about, oh wow, I walked thousands of miles across the country. It was these relationships that I was able to develop. And honestly, a lot of these people, I will never see them or talk to them again in my life. Like,
Yeah.
amazing.
Wow. So it sounds like to recap, the highlights were these moments of generosity that were given to you from complete strangers.
Absolutely. I mean, it was a walk for peace. It was primarily to highlight the good in this country. And we were hopeful that we would come across that, knowing how 2020 was and how 2020 brought out the worst and the best of people. I'll tell you that we saw the absolute best in most people. We did have, like 99% of people who just drive past us, right?
Hmm.
But that 1%, that did pull over, it made all the difference. And for me, that's enough, right? To know that we have 1% of humanity in this country. And I think it's probably even more than that, to be honest. Um, that is willing to do everything, set everything, their differences aside to lift you, right, in your situation.
Yeah. I think it's tough though to take that because some people might want to help, but you guys are technically like hitchhiker like.
Yeah, exactly. People have no idea what we're doing.
Scary. Yeah.
Um, for me, it's like I looked really approachable, but Paul, on the other hand, he had this beard and everything, and I think he pulled over more
I
often for
looked
me.
approachable.
I'm not saying that sounds awful, but it's the truth. It's like I look like a lost kid, like
The baby face.
really young for my age, and so I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, is this guy okay?" And it actually happened several times. They're like, "Where are your parents?"
Oh my God. So people would genuinely think you were a kid.
Yeah, somebody pulled over and legitimately thought that was like some high school kid just walking on the side of the road,
Where are your parents?
like somewhere in the middle of Nevada, hundreds of miles away from any civilization, and somebody would drive by and what are you doing out here?
That's hilarious. What are some of the like weirdest towns or places you've been?
Oh, so there are a few of those. Well,
What
let's see. Tonopah is a pretty interesting place.
is
So,
it?
Tonopah, Nevada. So you're
Tona.
from Nevada, right? So
Yeah.
Tonopah is northwest of, no, it's like northeast of Las Vegas, I believe. I think.
Okay.
Anyway, Tonopah, it's this really old town. It's kind of a mining community, but you walk into the town and there's this clown motel. It's this really quirky, haunted clown motel. And right
Ew.
next to it, if I kid you not, there's this really old cemetery. And I remember walking into that cemetery, and the first gravestone I saw, on the gravestone it read, "So and so murdered in his sleep in the canyon." And I'm like, oh, that's great. I'm like, that's exactly because I'm gonna be walking through this canyon. So I remember telling Paul, like, hey, let's go sleep in the clown motel. And he's like, no. So we ended up sleeping in the motel across the street from it. But we just I saw weird stuff in the skies. I don't know if it was UFOs or what, but some of the places, like we went to one hostel and they said that the people that worked there, they'd only been working there for like a year or two. They said every single day since they started working there, something weird has happened, like something has fallen off the shelf or flown across the room. I remember Paul and I stayed at a church in Colorado, and I wholeheartedly believe that that church was haunted. I was in the basement after the pastor had left and hearing laughing and dancing going on upstairs in this church. And it was like midnight.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And Paul heard it too?
I don't know if Paul did, but I remember telling him about this. You'd have to ask him. I remember walking through different forests and feeling like creepy eyes looking at me or, being watched. Especially walking through the desert was really creepy. So we'd walk, during the summertime to avoid the heat, we'd walk at night and then try to sleep during the daytime. So, you're walking at night, coyotes would be looking at you or mountain lions or whatever.
Oh,
See these green eyes in the distance.
you would see green eyes?
Yeah. And so when we were walking at night, I'd make sure I didn't listen to any music so that way I could be aware of my surroundings.
Yeah.
So it was really creepy walking at night and hearing things at night and, just walking with a flashlight.
Oh my God. That's
No
so scary.
street lights or anything, and you're just walking in the middle of the desert.
Ew.
And sometimes there was no road. Sometimes I was walking across straight desert, like just hoping that my GPS was taking me the right way.
Wow, the faith. Oh, so scary.
It was terrifying.
You like laugh at it now. Would you do it again?
I probably would, to be honest. I wouldn't take the same route. I think I would do a different route.
Oh, because that one was like the weirdest one, or
It's the most dangerous route. It's not a set, there are people that have walked across America. Mike Posner, who walked across America in 2019. And it's a very unsafe route, especially as you go further east, walking through West Virginia. There's not a lot of road to walk on. There's a stretch of like 400 or 500 miles of desert. So you have to be very strategic in how you plan that out. But I did do another walk. I walked around the island of Oahu in 2023. Wasn't
that's
as
right.
intense, but it was still pretty intense.
What did you notice a difference between like any like physical differences? Was it harder? Was it easier? Was the climate better? Like, what were the comparisons of the two walks?
So the walk in Hawaii I did by myself, and it was only 7 days. So I knew that I could finish it within a week. I walked consistently 20 to 22, 23 miles a day. Um, and I've been to Hawaii twice prior, so I was a little familiar with the island, but still not completely sure. It
Mhm.
had its own challenges, right? Because, you know, I was by myself. So I didn't have Paul next to me, motivating me, pushing me, someone there to protect me if someone crazy was there. I remember sleeping on the beach several times and being approached by homeless people and wondering like, okay, what's going to happen? it was lonely. It was just a different experience. It was also probably the most epic walk that I've been. I mean, I've seen some pretty amazing places across the country, walking through Yosemite, walking through parts of Utah and Colorado. But Hawaii is just something else,
Wow.
especially the coastal parts of Hawaii.
That's amazing. So when you were done, like when you said your end destination was Virginia Beach.
Yeah.
So when you finally took those last steps, like what did that feel like?
It was so surreal. Like I had been envisioning in my mind for the past, 6 months, this moment of walking to the beach because I used to live in Virginia Beach. I lived in DC and Virginia Beach. So I could legitimately see myself walking on the beach because I've done that before.
Wow.
And I could see myself walking up the stairs to the Lincoln Memorial on January 4th, 2021. So when I got there, it was just this huge relief, but it also felt a little empty because it's like, now what? You know, now
Mm.
I need to do something that just obliviates. Am I even saying that right?
Obliterate. It reminds me of Harry Potter.
Obliterate that goal, right? Like that was such a massive goal to accomplish. I felt a little anxious about like what's next.
Okay. Okay. So when you were done, when you were finally done, were there any regrets that you had?
It's a great question. I don't know. I mean, I'm grateful for how it turned out. I remember telling Paul at the very beginning, and this was a really naive thing to say, but I said, I'm gonna make it throughout the entire walk and only be positive. And, probably wasn't a few days until I started complaining about my feet or something, right? Like I realized that journey was not perfect at all. Like Paul and I got into a lot of fights. I mean, it was different than I think what I envisioned at first, but it
Hmm.
was exactly what I needed. So to say that if I had any regrets, I don't know if I did, but I remember looking back and saying like, yeah, like I'm glad I had that experience. It's going to teach me how to approach similar situations differently in the future. It's going to teach me how to approach conflict in a different way. It's going to teach me to set goals in a different way. So that's the only thing I can bring with me because I can't change anything that happened on the walk. But I still reflect. I mean, it's been 4 years, right? I was just telling you before the call that we finished, well, we made it to DC January 4th, 2021. So it happened so fast that when I got done, I was still trying to process everything that happened because every day it was like we're getting up, we're walking, we had all these different experiences. And by the end of the day, I still hadn't even processed what happened the previous day. Processing, and that's one of the reasons it's taken me so long to write this book, because I'm still processing everything that happened and just trying to figure out how do I feel about the situation and just really, I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Hmm.
letting it sink in and allowing it to teach me what it's supposed to. Um, it's just like I almost feel like there was 60 years of experience crammed in 6 months, literally, because I met people from all different walks of life.
Yeah.
So I got to hear people's stories, and it just, it was so impactful that I'm still reflecting on it every day. I think about it.
So you said that you would approach conflict differently. What's the difference? How do you approach conflict now that you've done the walk?
Yeah. So before I would avoid it, and that is not a healthy way to approach things. Uh, what I've learned is that sometimes when you're in a relationship or a situation where something goes wrong,
Hmm.
it's not always about admitting that you're wrong in the situation or the relationship, but sometimes it's about just taking ownership of it and
Mhm.
taking the lead and making things as right as you can. And sometimes it will never be perfect, but uh, I really I look back on that and think, okay, it's always better to over communicate things than it
Yeah.
is to guess that the other person understands what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah, I've
That
learned
was
that as
that's
well.
I'm sure you've experienced that in relationships that you've been in and
Oh yeah, yeah. I think it's so easy to assume that people know what we're thinking or what we're like our intentions are, but it's just not. It I feel like that creates the issue right there, is the assumption.
absolutely. And keep in mind, like all the people in your life all have different perspectives of who you are. So
Yeah.
so many different versions of you out there.
Yeah, yeah, that's trippy. It's
And
true.
so, my best friend probably had a different idea of who I was at that moment than what
Yeah,
I was really feeling. That makes sense.
it does.
So we really had to work through a lot of differences and learn to forgive each other. And I was really fortunate because I've, been in experiences before, like when I served a mission for my church,
Hmm.
where if I got into a fight with my friend, um, I learned ways to serve them, and that was usually the best way to resolve that conflict.
Wow. So so you would serve them after there was conflict?
Yeah, yeah. Usually it was making their bed or, in my situation with Paul, sometimes it was, writing a note or, he's a words of affirmation guy.
Hmm.
So it's, you know, affirming him in different ways. So
Wow.
really just paying attention and being thoughtful.
I love that. I love that. So you said you're writing a book. Tell our listeners what to listen for.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm actually writing the book about my walk and the experiences I had, but I'm also writing a children's book series, which Haley, you might be interested in this for your kid. So
Ooh, I
the
love
book
a
is
good
based,
pitch.
yeah. So the book is based on 12 different themes of kindness. So
Hmm.
whether it's gratitude or thoughtfulness, and it's using the stories that we experienced and teaching kids about that and parents
Hmm.
about that principle through our experiences.
Wow.
So it's going to be illustrated, and there's going to be some different. Yeah, I won't go into more detail into that, but that's kind of that's it. So
So when are you going to be publishing the kids book and your actual book?
ideally, I'd like to have um, all 12 written because each of them are pretty short books.
Uh-huh.
I'd like to have them all finished by the end of the year, so that
Ooh.
we can together. Uh, and my book about the walk, my solo book, I'm hoping to have that finished here by the end of the year too. So,
Ayo, that's so
yeah,
awesome. So, last question for you. What, as someone who's listening to this podcast, what is something you could give them as a piece of advice from this odyssey that you completed?
the biggest lesson that I learned from this experience was learning to surrender, learning to let go. And that's
Mm,
actually my word of intention for this year is to surrender. There's so
mm,
many times I had to surrender my ego, and not that ego is always bad, but my expectation of how it was going to turn out. Um, surrendering physical things. I found a different home for my dog, let go of a lot of physical possessions, material
yeah.
possessions. And so that is our life, right? Like this life is all about ebbs and flows. So like the quicker you can get to the point where you can surrender yourself to God, to the universe, whatever you believe in, the easier life is. Not that life is going to get easier, but when we're always in this state of control or force, we're
Hmm.
pushing against the experiences that we need to grow,
Yeah,
make us
definitely.
better, and to make us or to help us get at peace. That makes sense.
Mm,
So the moment I was able to surrender to this whole experience and surrender to the fact that I have no idea what I'm doing or how, like what tomorrow's going to look like, the closer I could be at peace with myself. And then amazing things would happen, miracles would happen, right? When I surrendered to the fact that, hey, I believe that we're going to have a place to stay. And then look what happened. Our friend reached out and sometimes that's not going to happen immediately, right? Like
yeah,
sometimes the things that we appreciate or give gratitude for that we want to manifest may not happen until down the road, but
yeah.
just the power of surrendering is so real.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. James, what a treat. Oh, this was awesome. Where can people find you? Do you have a website? What's your Instagram? Where can they connect with you?
I don't have a website right now, but you can connect with me on Instagram. Probably the most active on Instagram at James Allen Thompson, Alan Thompson. And yeah, I'll be posting content hopefully pretty soon. Kind of taking a break from that, but yeah, thank you for talking, Haley. It's always fun.
Thank you for tuning in to Healing with Haley. If you enjoyed this episode, I think you'll love my new 6-week coaching program. It's designed to help women embrace and love their bodies just as they are. Together, we'll explore your thoughts, meet them with compassion, and start releasing the ones that hold you back. Ready to start your journey to self-love? Join me and let's make this change together. Click the link in the podcast description below.